Greetings prayers, FiOth here, and today we're reviewing the Witch's Mountain update for Witchfire. Astronauts finally seem to have gotten in stride. They released these updates on a logical pace. It used to be huge stretches of time before they released anything, and this update specifically brings us face to face with the titular witch, as well as adding some weapons and spells to our repertoire to find and utilize. Without further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes. I will not be showing too much gameplay from this dungeon because I don't want to spoil it, but I will be relaying my thoughts on my findings. Let's start with how you can access these things. In a very logical move, astronauts hid this area behind defeating the enemy at the castle. That's Dimacha, the boss there. It replaced the slave kind of golem thingy that we used to fight back in earlier access. So you defeat this boss and you get the Witch Mountain chart required to access Witch Mountain. If you don't have this chart, you will not be able to access the dungeon at all because it is stated as a basic requirement. Here you can see where you can find the boss. Good luck defeating him. As soon as you have completed this requirement, the Witch Mountain will be available at the hub. It's stated as a very strong opposition zone, and for some reason the Witchfire gains are 100%, a bit lower than what you would get from the castle and previous dungeons. Gear wise, the footage you're seeing is me using the Duelist, by far the strangest armament we've got in this game. This you can research as soon as you update your client. For the rest of the new equipment, you get it by completing stages of the new area, the new dungeon. It's kind of weird how they have gated it. You have to open specific segments of the map by using a new currency that you find in the map. But overall, you just run the map, try to get as far as you can, and as soon as you complete it, you get additional rewards. So it's back to the grind, learning the new patterns, learning the new fights, and overcoming them. As for the new map itself, it's an ordeal. I am playing this at max Gnosis. I don't think you can even enter if you don't have max Gnosis. That is 4 at the moment. And it's filled with enemies. Pretty challenging ones in some cases. I don't understand why these great shield dudes had to be in the game. They are very, very annoying to fight. But you go from segment to segment, doing some platforming, some of which is a bit butt clenching, like you have to clear huge gaps with very precise jumping. Interesting for some people. I guess if you grew up playing Super Mario games, this is gonna be right up your alley. I'm not a big platformer guy, but the combat itself is very, very challenging because you are fighting against overwhelming odds. To make the overwhelming odds seem more feasible for the logical flow of the game, they have added a kind of ritual that you perform in the map itself, where you consume some tablets that you found throughout your incursions, and you get huge boosts to your stats. Now the issue with this is that these consumables are not reusable. They are destroyed as soon as you utilize them. So if you go in here and make a half-assed attempt at completing the dungeon, or your game crashes or whatever, this consumable will be taken out of your inventory and that'll be it. You're never getting it back. You have to go run something else, collect these consumables, and then come and give it another go. Of course, you can run it vanilla. You don't have to use any of that stuff, but you will be severely underpowered. There is a niche aspect at the end of this dungeon that I am not going to spoil because it's kinda cool to witness, that kinda evens the odds in your favor. But all in all, I would have preferred these tablets are reusable, so you collect them all once and you can reuse them as many times as you want, or if you wanna challenge yourself, you just don't use them and proceed normally. The prayer ecosystem has also received a reward. You now initiate the ritual back at base as usual, and it will state what kind of steps have to be taken in order to accumulate them. It usually entails destroying elites, and you can loot them from the environment and from chests, so you no longer have to go to very specific zones or do very specific things in order to accumulate them. So let's break this whole thing down. We get a new map, something that's been a first for quite a bit. From the very, very early days of early access, we really had a couple of places to play with. Then we got the show, and then we had access to some more upgrades for the equipment part of the game and the guns and the spells, but nothing as drastic as a whole map. So now we have 4 areas to play with. We have new spells, accessories and guns to upgrade, a whole new unique battle sequence at the end of Witch's Mountain, and of course the boss therein. This is a pretty hefty upgrade, and I'm very happy to see that the devs have finally found the rhythm to releasing content. This is early access, and I've been telling people watching my vids and streams that I consider Witchfire to be the backbone of something that will eventually be considered a timeless classic. It is one of the most unique, interesting and inspired games I have ever played, combining some of my favorite genres, the roguelite and souls-like elements. I don't have anything negative to say here. I found a couple of stretches where the game hogs a lot of memory, causing slowdowns, in some cases quite extreme, becoming nigh unplayable, whilst I've been able to get about 100 frames per second during the first couple of maps. By the midpoint of the new area, I sometimes dropped to a mere 10 to 15. I suspect it's a memory leak issue because you turn off the application, then you turn it back on, and it seems to alleviate the problem somewhat. So if you're running a lower spec system, you might want to consider taking your settings down a notch and keeping an eye out for those slowdowns so they don't ruin your experience. Finally, a word about these witch marks that we can now collect from various zones in the game. It is not a very good idea to wall the chances of someone beating your newest level behind the power-up that is consumable and exhaustible. Just make these things reusable so people can make an attempt without thinking too much about it. I personally yesterday had to turn the game off at some point because I failed an expedition, and then my thought was like, well, I'm not going out there again to get the witch marks, so I might as well return to the game tomorrow. Make them reusable because people might lose interest or be very disheartened to come and try again. And because I don't see a new map coming out in about 3 months, I would certainly recommend they take another look at this mechanic. This has been so far the most interesting of the updates that Witchfire received. I've been covering the game since the start of early access and streamed it, so consider subscribing to the channel and please hit that notification bell to be notified about uploads and streams. The way YouTube works these days makes it extremely difficult for us to get our content to our audiences. Until next time, be well, stay frosty and always strive for perfection, peeps. Cheers!